Hello and welcome to another edition of Midlands Business Update. This week's show really has got something for everyone. We're talking ice cream, we're talking car washes, the Asian business sector, and we've even got an appearance from a member of One Direction. More about that a little bit later. First though, how healthy is your local high street? We hear much about the death of the local independent corner shop in the face of stiff competition from out-of-town retailers, but are we overstating the issue? And if we're not, are we just sitting by idly and letting our local heritage slip through our hands? Well, it's something of a specialist subject for Professor Mike Haynes from the University of Wolverhampton, who joins us now. Good evening, Mike. Thank you for joining us. Yeah. Before we get into the actual high street issue, just tell us a little bit about your background and your specialisms.
Okay, well, my background is I work at the University of Wolverhampton in the business school. I'm slightly unusual for two reasons. Firstly, because I actually trained as an economic historian. So I knew actually quite a lot about the Black Country before I actually came here in 1975, because you study the Industrial Revolution and therefore you learn about the rise of the Midlands industry from James Watt to the smaller chain makers of Sedgley and so on and so forth. But I'm also interested in the global economy. I'm supposed to be an expert on Russia, of all things.
But I guess an interesting place to research at the moment, isn't it?
Yes, it is an interesting place to research at the moment. Lots and lots of fascinating things going on there, and of course there's a huge controversy over what's going on there. But I guess unlike most other people, I also shop. And one of the things I do when I shop is try and work out what's actually going on in the high street. So it doesn't actually start in a very scientific way. You're just actually looking and observing. But then you begin to ask questions, well, why are these things happening in the different shopping centres that you go around, whether it be Wolverhampton, Warsaw, West Bromwich, or what have you? How do you actually understand what's happening?
And do you think that you find the same kind of issues cropping up in all of those, or are they very different, the Wolverhamptons, the Dudleys, the Warsaws, the Birminghams?
I think the same underlying issues are there, which is that the retail sector is in deep, deep difficulties. It's been in some difficulties. The high streets have been in some difficulties for some time, but obviously the recession has made that worse. You have to add things to that. Wolverhampton has suffered to a degree from the problems in actually developing Summer Row. This was this huge development that unfortunately was to an extent brought down by the economic crisis. So that can make the situation worse. You've also, of course, got lots and lots of variation between the different towns, depending upon the kind of catchment areas, the consumer areas that they draw on. And then, of course, there's the really controversial factor, which is the impact of the out-of-town shopping centres and the way in which that has an impact on the high street.
Which is, and that is, I guess, a common factor, because every high street, every traditional market town high street has got an out-of-town retail centre fairly close by, haven't they?
That's right. There are very few that haven't, although there's a breathing space emerged somewhat because the difficulties of the big four supermarkets has meant that they're not necessarily capitalising on the land that they'd set aside to develop. As many of your listeners and viewers will probably know, companies like Tesco and that have decided to pull back somewhat. Bit of a problem in Wolverhampton, because in a sense there was a hope that Tesco as an would actually help regenerate Wolverhampton a little bit. Might not have done much for the shopping centre itself, but now it's pulled out. So that's an indication of some of the difficulties that the big supermarkets are having, and therefore there is this breathing space for smaller town centres that maybe thought they were going to be hit by a big out-of-town development.
Now, I love the fact, I mean, you've done some really in-depth research into the local high street, and I love the fact that one of them, particularly that I was reading, has categorised all our high streets based on various different kinds of ice cream.
This is exactly right. Not different kinds of ice cream, because I have to admit to being very peculiar, although they're a small and select group of us. And that small and select group are the people whose only real interest is vanilla ice cream. You can have all the other things, but it seems to me that the real litmus test of ice cream is, can you produce a good vanilla ice cream? And sadly, most vanilla ice creams that you buy are a great, great disappointment, because they taste of nothing. But if you find a really good vanilla ice cream, then I think that beats any other one. So usually when I go shopping, one of the things I'm on the lookout for is a decent vanilla ice cream. And that's when you see a problem. because when you look around the high streets, it's actually very, very difficult to buy ice creams. And it suddenly occurred to me that you could actually divide towns into the kind of ice creams that were on sale there. So I've got a 5 ice cream scale, and you can see whether it works for your town.
It'd be good to give everyone who's listening to this now, let's make sure that we put this to the test next time we go shopping.
Okay. Well, right at the bottom of the town, of the scale, is what I call Van Town. If the only place you can get an ice cream is from an ice cream van, then I think you know that the area that you live in is in some difficulties. Even the trade from ice cream vans is in some difficulties. Nobody knows how many ice cream vans there are. The estimates are fairly wild, but it's fairly clear that the numbers have collapsed enormously. And to survive in the ice cream van trade, the best thing is to have a pitch, a semi-permanent pitch, maybe at somewhere like Chasetown Reservoir or something like that. But if you're reduced to touring the streets, you're not necessarily going to have a very strong business. And if that's all you've got in your local community, then I think you've got some difficulties. Next up the scale is what I call Magnum Town. Now, Magnums are the most popular ice creams in Britain.
Just rebranded, haven't they?
Yeah, biggest selling ice cream in Britain. All you need to sell Magnums is a fridge. So basically, your local off-license might sell Magnums. You possibly will, you'll almost certainly be able to go into your local convenience store and buy a Magnum, maybe a Cornetto or something like that. So that's a kind of sign that there's a little bit of life left in the community. But if that's all you've got, then I think, again, we've got real problems. I think a really interesting place to think about in terms of buying ice creams is Thorntons. Now, if you go to Thorntons, you find that the ice creams there are brought in at a particular time in the year. It used to be the case that you could say there was almost a semi-official summertime, and that's when Thorntons brought the ice cream back to the Thorntons store. The interesting thing about the Thorntons ice cream is, of course, their soft scoop. They're rather classy soft scoop compared to some of them. But the great problem is that Thorntons has been in deep, deep difficulties. Thorntons' business model involves stores that they own themselves and franchises. And in 2010, they cut back quite dramatically in the number of stores that they've got, cut it back by around about 30%.
We saw that in this region here, didn't we?
That's
a lot of towns lost
their Thorntons. Yeah. So if your town's maintaining its Thorntons, then breathe a sigh of relief. There's a little bit of life in it because there's a little bit of life in the ice cream trade. But if you've lost your Thorntons, I'm afraid you're heading down towards Magnum Town. Now we go into the slightly better ones, and the slightly better ones are what I call the soft scoop towns. These are the ones where you can go along and you can buy a soft scoop ice cream. And if you can buy a soft scoop ice cream from an independent, then that's usually a good sign that there's a market out there, and people are coming to the high street with a little bit more spending power, and they're going in and they're buying the soft scoop ice creams. We can have a little bit of finesse, because when I buy a soft scoop, I notice that in some places they want to charge me extra for a waffle cone, and in other places they'll give me it for free. If you're getting charged extra for the waffle cone in that soft scoop shop, you know that maybe their margins are a little bit tight and they want to squeeze a little bit more out of you. But if you can buy a reasonable soft scoop ice cream, then breathe a sigh of relief. That's a shopping centre that's got some life in it. Of course, the really class ones are what I call gelato towns.
Oh, that's the luxury.
That's the luxury one. Yeah. Now, if you've got an ice cream parlour, and ice cream parlours are growing in number, and if you can buy a decent, high-quality gelato ice cream, then that's a really good sign. You're looking at a really, if you like, vibrant town centre. So you can look around and you can measure the nail bars, and you can measure the tattoo parlours, and you can measure the charity shops. But it's really, really interesting if you've got a couple of spare pounds in your pocket to look and see if you can buy a decent ice cream. And the quality of the ice cream you can buy tells you an awful lot about how vigorous the life is in that shopping centre, or whether it's sadly on the way declining.
I am partial to a very nice mint choc chip,
right.
So I'm going to be going out this weekend and putting that theory to the test. I mean, that's a perfect example of how you can actually, economics can be brought to life in a really practical, visual way, isn't it? I mean, there's the story though behind the high streets. Mm-hmm. Is there a general trend? I mean, are we all heading towards Gelato Town, or are we all heading down towards
we're heading in quite different directions, and this is the peculiar thing. Companies like Waitrose are doing quite well. because they are pitching themselves, if you like, for the more prosperous markets. And so, of course, are the gelato ice cream sellers. They're pitching for the people who've come in and they've got quite a lot of discretionary power. The difficulty is, of course, that there are fewer and fewer people going into town centres to buy the bigger stuff. And therefore, town centres can very easily get into a vicious circle of decline. And that's when you notice things missing. Now, there are some pretty obvious things. A lot of people, for example, were very dismissive when Woolworths collapsed, but very quickly realised what a huge hole it left in the high street. What I like about my ice cream example is it does have really good economic sense underneath it, and the economic sense underneath it is that ice cream is a luxury good. It's considered a luxury good and an impulse good. So if you've got people who have got a little bit of money in their pocket and the sun comes out, then they don't mind spending the money on the ice cream.
That's a fascinating way to look at it. I hope that's been really thought-provoking. It certainly has for me. Mike, thank you so much for coming in. After the break, we'll be talking skills and productivity with the president of the Black Country Chamber of Commerce, and we'll also be taking a look at what happened when One Direction's Liam Payne donned his hard hat for a visit to a building site in Wolverhampton. Welcome back to Midlands Business Update. Now, a couple of weeks ago, Alice Davey was here in the studio telling us all about The Way, a major new youth development in Wolverhampton. Well, Alice was among a host of dignitaries who donned their hard hats to take a look at how building work is taking shape. Others included the owner of Wolverhampton Wanderers Football Club and boss of Red Row Construction, Steve Morgan, and none other than Liam Payne from One Direction. Let's take a look.
First and foremost, welcome to The Way. As you can see, it's really starting to take shape. You can walk in any of the rooms now, see what they are, how big they are. It's going to be a huge, iconic building on Wolverhampton's skyline.
So we've introduced a couple of new extra spaces to try and make girls feel more welcome and at home in the youth zone. So we've got a girls' room, which boys are allowed.
It offers an opportunity for kids who maybe haven't had the opportunities that other children have had to meet people and refocus themselves in another direction.
We're talking about young people coming here. We've got one very special young person here today, and that's Liam Payne from One Direction. Liam has said, look, that he would like to be involved with The Way. And we're talking about role models here now. I mean, Liam is a local lad, Wolverhampton boy. And to have Liam here today is really the cherry on top of the ice and on top of the cake. You know, he's a worldwide fame, and yet he's come here. He wants to give back something to young people of Wolverhampton.
It absolutely been an amazing day today here at the Way.
There ain't that much stuff around Wolverhampton. Now this is here. It's brilliant. I'm happy for him.
Most of the rooms were really useful. Like most children would use those rooms these days.
I'm delighted to be supporting it, giving something back to the children of Wolverhampton who so desperately need our support.
I'm amazed they've built it so fast, to be honest. So it's been a great experience.
They've seen it from the road, and then when they get into the building, they just can't believe the space we're going to have, the amount of activity for young people, and really the quality of work that we're going to be able to do here.
You can see now that the vision we had 18 months ago for the Way Youth Zone, the way the young people have participated, they've come up with the name. You can see it's all starting to become a reality. Raise a glass for the Way and for Wolverhampton Youth Zone and its success.
The Way.
Cheers. The Way.
Well, I don't remember youth facilities quite like that when I was young. It looks like a fantastic project. Now, though, time to introduce my second guest, and he's a man with many strings to his bow. President of Black Country Chamber of Commerce, chairman of the Black Country Asian Business Association, and a member of the local Enterprise Partnership Board, to name but a few. Ninder, Johal, thanks for fitting us in to your busy schedule.
It's lovely to be here, as always.
Let's start with your chamber role. You've been appointed president. Now, you don't get that sort of job without having a wide array of experience and background in business. So Why were you the suitable man for the job?
Well, I think that's for others to judge. But I've now been 12 months. I've been a president, so I'm now going into the second year. And I think what's useful for me is I get to understand the business environment even more. I get a wonderful chance to meet people like you.
You'll go far.
And I suppose it's the fact that I've been involved largely in the creative sector. Understand the service sector, and I've just moved into the manufacturing sector. So it does give me a broad sense of experience of what people are going through and what the challenges are going forward, and they're always going to be challenges.
So just talk a little bit about your business, because the business you run is the reason that it gives you this this array of experience.
Yeah, well, despite doing a master's in business, I sort of threw that away and decided, my parents went ballistic when I did it, that I set up a record company. And that was because of my love of music, and I was playing with a band, and I had this crazy idea, Carl, that one day British Asian music produced in the black country would one day go mainstream in the charts. Obviously, everybody thought I was a bit cuckoo.
But you did, didn't you?
But we did, yeah. In 2004, we entered the British charts at number 5. It was a wonderful, wonderful day. We managed to catapult ourselves into the American states. We had Jay-Z featuring on us. We went number 7 there. Number 2 in Germany, and we went number 1 in 9 of the different countries in Europe. And I remember the day when I got a call from Italia and said, by the way, you've gone number 1, you've just knocked off Ronan Keating.
Well.
Yes. So the only territory actually we were not able to sell music to was, incidentally, was China. And we know what China believe in free music, and of course, that was back in 2004. Now we've moved into 2014, 2015, where actually the technological revolution has meant that actually a lot of things now are free. So maybe the Chinese were a bit ahead of their time.
Yeah, but the fact that you've sort of gone into international markets, albeit from the music side of things,
absolutely,
gives it's exactly the same principle, isn't it? It's how a business here markets themselves out of the area, and it's all about the awareness, the brand, needing a hook. Yeah, how aware do you think black country businesses are of the possibilities that exist out there for them?
I think there's a couple of things. I think there's the fear of the unknown. I'm sure living on an island doesn't help. I think if you were in the middle of Europe, where boundaries are not water, you just go through a roadblock. So I think that hasn't helped. I think also there's the risk factor, the money you spend going out. And of course, I think it become easier now simply because international travel has meant that people now holiday a lot. So they taste other cultures, they taste other forms of living. And I think that makes it more conducive now to international trade.
That's also one of the big dilemmas though, isn't it? In that you want to build a local brand, but actually you don't want to become too parochial. You actually want to make it clear that you're open for business here, don't you?
But look, if you look at now the biggest companies that operate in the world, they're largely technological companies. So your competition now is not the guy down the street. Your competition is not in Manchester. Your competition could be as far as Bangladesh. It could be in any country, because a press of a button could make your business redundant. And believe me, when you're in the music industry, we almost saw that happen to us. So I think you need to be agile. I think you need to be international. I think you need to be open. And I think you need to understand that we now live in a global marketplace where it's been as connected as it's never been before.
How do you think the black country is positioned at the moment in terms of the skills that it needs to go forward?
Look, there's issues the black country has, there's issues the region has. But the good news is that we are now the number 2 LEP area, that's the Local Enterprise Partnership, in terms of growth, 4.5%. We're now number 2 in the country, but that doesn't mean we don't have problems. And the problems we do have been going for a while. We have a skill shortage. We don't have enough students leaving with the right appropriate skills. Those who have got the the academic qualifications are perhaps not ready for work. So I think there are a number of issues, and we need to put an infrastructure in place that really does rectify that problem.
The will's there around here, though, isn't it? The will to actually get the various business organisations working together. There's a real good network.
Look, the black country is full of some wonderful people. And I think as a region, we're able to overcome any problems. And I think what you're now finding, because the way we operate, and people are working much, much closer together. So you've got the chamber working closely with the consortium, working with the colleges, working with the universities, working with the schools. There is a sense of goodwill.
What we're not so great at, though, isn't it, is shouting about our achievements. You know, other countries, other areas, they'll champion themselves, they'll talk themselves up. We're very polite, aren't we?
Have you ever met an American who hasn't shouted in front of you?
Never.
Never. No, they've got it right. #1 economy in the world. I tell you, they don't hesitate in telling you how good they are. They go a bit too far sometimes, but they don't hesitate.
But in an international marketplace, like you say, they're competing against everyone, and so are we.
Absolutely.
And there must be lessons we can learn.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, perception is key. And if you talk about strategically where this region is, you just take the Northern Powerhouse. They call it the Northern Powerhouse. And what are they really good at? Well, they're really good at shouting. And what that means is that the government in place today, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but the money's floating up to the north. And why is that? It's because they're very good at shouting.
Now, talking of shouting, before we go, we must touch on one of your other strings to your bow is your involvement in the Black Country Asian Business Association, and you've got an awards programme going on right now, encouraging businesses to do exactly that, shout about their achievements. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, absolutely. So 19th of June, it's at the Wolverhampton Racecourse, and I know your TV station is going to cover it, and this is where we're encouraging Asian businesses who have sort of not been as prevalent as they should be in terms of publicity, and getting them to shout about how good the region is and how good they are. And they do employ thousands of people in the region. So we're talking food, we're talking IT, we're talking transport, you name whichever sector they're involved in. And this is a platform for them to shout, but it's simultaneously to shout how good the region is.
Excellent. And entries are still open. So
entries are still open to the 5th of May.
How can people get involved?
Oh, easy. They can drop me a line, and they can go on the Bacaba website, the Black Country Asian Business website. They can tweet me. They can send me something by LinkedIn. They can even send me a photograph by Instagram. Listen, we're in the world of technology. I'm easy to get hold of.
Excellent. We must have you back in the studio to talk music. I want to talk about Ronan Keating, Jay-Z, all sorts of things.
Listen, look forward to it anytime.
Thank you for dropping in and coming to see us, and we'll speak to you again. Thank you, Ninder. Thank you.
Thanks.
That's all we've got time for this week, I'm afraid. Next week, we're inviting a panel of local business journalists into the studio to chew over the election campaign and suggest what the results might mean for the local economy. Until then, thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon.